Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and present our findings to such a diverse group of scholars, practitioners, policymakers. It's really, really amazing. So this is joint work with my co-authors, Joe Peak and Gökhan Torna. And as you can see from the title, it is about the value of relationship lending. We've had a few speakers already, Governor Bowman, Commissioner Clark, and then our scholars, and everywhere we kind of touched upon this idea that community banks are vital, community banks are needed. However, there is a decline in the number of community banks, there is competition. The question is the model is valuable? Is it really worthwhile for community banks to continue what they're doing? So what we do in this study, we actually address this question. So we investigate whether small business lending, the relationship lending of community banks, does it contribute to the market value of those banks? And the previous research, the previous literature has shown that relationship lending is definitely valuable, but mostly to the firms, right? So the borrowers who engage in relationship lending, they tend to benefit from those relationships. But very few studies address the other side of that equation. Does it benefit banks, all right? And the mechanism for small business lending contributing to bank value, theoretically, it's pretty sound. The idea is that engaging in small business lending, which is relationship-based, banks acquire information, they then exploit their monopoly, the informational monopoly, in order to extract rents. And as a result, they are able to derive that premium. Now, other sources of relationship lending adding value could include core deposits, because very often the customers who engage in relationship lending with the banks, they also keep their cheap, inexpensive, stable core deposits with that same bank. And finally, banks also have the opportunities to do cross-selling of different products for their relationship customers. In the end of the day, the question is, are those rents and earnings, potential earnings that the banks derive from relationship lending, do they cover the cost associated with ex-ante, screening and ex-post monitoring of those relationship borrowers? And in this paper, we don't look at rents versus cost, we look at the final result. We are asking the question, if indeed the rents associated with relationship lending exceed the cost, then it has to show up in the market premium. It has to be the case that it adds value to the banking organization. And that's exactly what we do. Our main hypothesis is that small business lending by banking organizations is value enhancing. So what do we mean by value? Well, we focus on market premium. Now, when we say market premium, the first thought is, well, we need to look at publicly traded banks. And that's exactly how this paper started a few years ago. We just said, all right, let's look at publicly traded banks and try to see how the market premium, market over book value, how is it attributed to various categories of assets. But then we realized, of course, that the vast majority of publicly traded banks are not community banks, but it's community banks that actually engage in relationship lending. So we figured it's good, publicly traded sample is good, but it's not where the action is. So how can we figure out the market value of community banks because they're not publicly traded? Well, that's where the idea of looking at M&As came. So when Bank A acquires Bank B, we observe the price, right? And that price is actually market value of that institution at that particular time, even though technically it's not a publicly traded bank. So in the end of the day, in this study, we look at two samples. One is mergers and acquisition samples, which focuses primarily on smaller community banks, but we also check and verify if our results still hold if we look at publicly traded banks, some of which are community banks. Not a lot, but there are some. So I'm going to skip the sample. So how exactly we identify those market premiums associated with various assets and liabilities? Well, we borrow the idea from accounting research. So the market value of equity, by definition, is equal to market value of assets minus market value of liabilities, plus some market value of balance sheet activities and unobservable characteristics of a bank. So that's just a simple balance sheet identity. Now, if on the left-hand side we have market value of equity, but on the right-hand side we have book value of different assets and liabilities, because we do not observe market values of separate asset categories. Now, if we put it in a regression, then the coefficients in the regression will pick up the actual market premium, market over book value ratio for a very specific asset category. So for instance, in this specification, if I look at the laser thing, probably not working, but that's fine. For example, if I look at alpha I coefficient on asset I, alpha I being greater than 1 would suggest that there is a premium, a market premium associated with that asset I. On the other hand, if alpha I is less than 1, then that asset is discounted by the market participants. So now, if we take that and start decomposing assets in various categories, in particular, our main interest is loans, C&I loans and CRE loans. And luckily, the call reports contain information on small loans, small CI and small CRE loans. So now we can see, in contrast, the market premium associated with small CI loans, small CRE loans versus large CI and large CRE loans. And then we see what's going on there. So our main hypothesis is that beta 2 coefficient is greater than 1, meaning that for every dollar of CI loan, small CI loans, the market value goes up by more than $1. But probably equally important is that beta 2 minus beta 1 is greater than 0, meaning that not only small CI loans add value, but they also add value beyond what large CI loans do. So again, beta 2 minus beta 1 is greater than 0. Okay, now I'm going to show you some results. We have a lot more in the paper, of course, but for in the interest of time, I'm going to show you only the most important ones. So we have two specifications. One is Tobin Q on the left-hand side. Another one is market value of equity on the left-hand side. The coefficients are interpreted the same way. Tobin Q is just assets plus, market value plus liabilities. So we bring liabilities on the left-hand side. It doesn't really matter in terms of interpretation of the coefficients, but Tobin Q is just more standard in M&A literature. But again, don't worry about it. Whether it's Tobin Q or market value of equity, we get very similar results. So now let's focus, for example, on the coefficient for community banks on small CI loans. As you can see, a coefficient equal to 1.21. What does it mean? It means that for every dollar of small CI loans on a balance sheet of a target bank, the acquirer is willing to pay $1.21 of actual value, of actual price. So in other words, small CI loans are associated with 21-cent premium per dollar of book value. On the other hand, if you look at large CI loans, the coefficient is very close to 1, meaning that book value, market value is not very different. So in other words, large CI loans do not add value in terms of market value. Now, of course, that doesn't say that they're not profitable, right? It just means that, once they are discounted using future cash flows, there is no difference between book and market value. So there is no abnormal premium associated with those loans. Now, the obvious question is, how did it change over time? We talked about it today. Some speakers mentioned that there is a lot of pressure on community banks, especially from competitors like FinTech, for instance. So we were wondering, does that premium associated with small business loans, does it change over time? So in one of the variations of our analysis, we split sample into two subperiods. The one that is 94 to 2009, and then 2010 to 2021. That's basically right in the middle of our overall sample period. And as you can see here, even though it looks like the premium declined a little bit, the difference is not statistically significant. And most importantly, the premium compared to large CI loans is still there, whether it's in the beginning of the sample or in the end of the sample. Hence the title, that ship has not sailed for community banks. Maybe we should say has not yet sailed. So we'll see. But at least for now, looks like the value of small business lending is still there. And we replicate all of these results for our publicly traded bank sample, and the results are still there. So the next question is, the richness of the data, the call report data, allow us to decompose small business loans even more. Now we're looking at the smallest category of small business loans, because by definition, small business loans are the ones that are below $1 million. But it turns out that we can see below 100 and then 100 to 1 million. And as you can see here from these results, for example, if you look at the column 2, for community banks with Tobin Q, the premium for the smallest category of loans, the ones that are below $100,000 value, is even higher. It's actually 39 cents per dollar of book value. So not only small business lending is value enhancing, but it's actually the smallest loans that give that, that drive that result, which again speaks to the idea of relationship lending being valuable. Then we asked another question. We said, all right, if Bank A acquires Bank B, we talked about that before again today, that as a result of those mergers and acquisitions, what's going to happen with community banking? What's going to happen with their services to the community? So we were wondering, do those acquirers preserve small business loan portfolios of their targets? So we created a counterfactual combined merged entity before acquisition. So it's basically your Bank A and Bank B combined before they merged. And then we looked at Bank A plus Bank B after merger. And then we looked at the growth, the compounded annual growth rate in small business loans. And we compared that to controlled, matched banks that are similar characteristics, similar size, similar loan portfolios, and so on. And what you can see here that on average, for example, if you focus on total small CI loans, the combined merged entity keeps growing small business loans by 6% on average per year, while matched control banks grow only at 3% per year. So the difference is statistically significant. So the idea here is that not only those merged institutions eliminate small business lending, they actually grow it, and they grow it at a faster rate than the matched control banks. So that's sort of a good news that maybe those mergers and acquisitions do not necessarily destroy the services of those community banks. Maybe they acquire them and they continue, let them do what they're doing best. Okay, the next few results are for publicly traded banks only, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip some of them because they're very, very similar. What I do want to show is this slide here. Unfortunately, for M&A sample, we were not able to see what's going on during financial crisis because there were hardly any mergers during that period. However, for publicly traded bank sample, we do observe the crisis period, and we ask this very simple question. If relationship lending is valuable, is it valuable during bad times? What happens? What happens to that market premium associated with small business loans when conditions worsen? So we actually look at crisis period versus non-crisis period, and as you can see from the results, for example, for small 1 CI, which is the smallest category of business loans, the market premium is still there, and in fact, it's actually larger, although the increase is not statistically significant, but that's not what's important. What's important is that it's still there, and in fact, for $1 of book value of smallest CI loans, the market is willing to pay 60-cent premium. So what it tells us is that relationship lending is valuable on average, but it's even more valuable during bad times, and that makes sense because that's the time when there is significant demand for those distressed borrowers, and community banks having that informational advantage, they're able to utilize that comparative advantage and extract more value. Now to conclude, this study focused on the value of relationship lending for community banks. We show that it does enhance value. We show that the value enhancing effect is present during a great financial crisis. It did not go away in the recent period, at least for now, meaning that so far community banks seem to have survived the pressure from the competitors. On the other hand, small CRE loans do not show that result, and that makes sense because CRE loans are primarily transaction-based, more credit scoring type of lending. It's not really relationship lending. So it makes sense, it fits the story that it's actually relationship lending that adds value. So we are optimistic for community banking, at least from this study. Seems like the value is there, and community banks should be doing what they're doing because they are not only benefiting local economy, but they also, preserve their franchise values by engaging in relationship lending. Thank you very much.